Okay, so Sergio, we are live again. I don't even know the number. I haven't looked at it today, but it's
I think we're
I
on
don't know,
16 or 17. 17
16 or
maybe.
17. Yes,
Yeah, I
possibly.
think
Yes,
so.
we'll put it in the description. And yeah, what's our topic today? What we're talking about today?
Today we are talking about the relationship between trauma and money. Our
Oh, money.
beliefs around
Okay.
money and that whole topic, which I feel is um, pretty important. And I feel like it's a connection that most people can relate to in one way or another. Even if they're not aware, I think that by the end of today's talk, it's something that they'll be able to see more within themselves and maybe be able to work on. So,
Okay, nice.
so
So do
yeah,
you have some? Yeah, I mean, money makes the world go round. Isn't that the saying, right? So what are the questions? What are
money
we going
does
to
make
talk
the world
about?
go round. I think there there are just so many ways we can start this, and there's so many things that we can talk about, and they relate to what we've been talking about for the past several months. I think a good thing to think about is um, we all have a, whether we know it or not, each of us have a unique relationship to money. um, and sometimes that can be not as explicitly seen as we do with other forms of relationships, right? Like we are very aware how we feel about somebody. We're like, well, we like them, or oh, they're nice to us, or we like spending time with them. We don't like spending time with them. We have these kind of certain things that are we're more aware. These kind of parameters of how we see a relationship with somebody. I feel like with money, it tends to be more subconscious. There tends to be more conditioning as well of how we see money. And do you is that something that with your many years of doing this kind of work, is that something that you stumble upon as well, with other people, that people come to you to say like, I want to fix this. I see money this way and I don't know what to do about it. I don't want to be poor, or I consider myself poor, or I have a lot of limitations in my head. Is that something you've seen people come to you and work with, or is that something you've had to deal with yourself?
I have had to do with that, deal with that myself as well. And I think the issue there is money is a wonderful way, a wonderful tool, sorry, to basically not look at your issues. Okay. So when you have enough money, then you can just go to the movies, or you just go out for dinner, or you just take a vacation or whatever. So money can buy you this. Again, the slogan, money buys you happiness. That's in a way true, because if you feel depressed, if you feel sad, if you feel stressed out, you just do a glamping weekend, something very expensive and fancy, and then you at least can on Monday and Tuesday at work can talk about it. So Monday, Tuesdays are good. Okay, money bought you happiness for Mondays and Tuesdays,
Hmm.
and then on Wednesdays it's again like, job sucks or whatever. Yeah, colleagues are difficult. And then, but then there is the weekend again, and the weekend then we're going to trip to DC or whatever, and then we can basically go from weekend to weekend if we have enough money and we can spend it. And so if we have enough money, we can use it to cope very well. So
Okay.
people not having enough money, they are missing a tool to cope, and usually that brings them earlier to therapy. Okay, because they're looking for ways to solve the issues, not with money because they don't have that, but they're looking to solve the issues, really solve the issues. And so after the biggest issues are out of the way, then typically in the mid of therapy, money comes up. Okay, and then yeah, we see, and everybody has a relationship to money, as you pointed out. And in this relationship, usually if you don't have money, usually that relationship is a bit troublesome, because if you have a good relationship with money, then you usually tend to have money. Okay,
Right.
so the way you see people having or not having money is, from my point of view, it has nothing to do with education or with just being lucky or something. It's just, in a way, it reflects our inner relationship with money. So I can give you an example. Um, if you think that there are people that are posh and that are going to just to 5-star restaurants, or no, 2-star, 1-star restaurant, 5-star hotels, and so on. And if you dislike these people, obviously you are going to choose consciously if you actively dislike them, or subconsciously, because subconsciously you dislike them, you're going to make decisions in your life to not end up there. Okay. So these decisions that you are taking basically are decisions that are like, I'm not taking that job. And then the reason is because then I would be fake, I would pretend or something like this. And therefore you wouldn't earn that high salary. Okay. So we make up the reasons we find, again, I think we talked about that in the earlier episodes. Many things we use reasoning to just calm our emotional self a little bit. Okay. So if I actually don't want to do that subconsciously, I find a reason why it's not a good idea to do it. And then obviously the reason usually has some logic in it. And then we say, no, these are people who are superficial, or these are that, and so on. And then we know that is projection. We talked about projection.
Sure.
And we're using these defensive mechanisms to not look into our things, into our issues. And so one of the main questions from me is, how would you feel when you had a lot of money?
Right. Are you asking me personally? Because if it was
And
personally,
now, if you like, you can think about it and
I
just answer it.
I yeah, that's true. I like money. I like money a lot. I have my own beliefs around it. I definitely think there are things that make this topic confusing, even not so much for me, but I could see why it could be, because we tend to think as about money also within within a societal parameter and the needs of society. And having like too much money can be, um I see it as maybe something like you're being, like you're having too much. And that's because I feel things that might pop up for me are like guilt, like guilt about having a lot of money. I have some guilt about having a lot of money, even though I do still work hard and I learn skills to earn a lot of money, and I invest. So I'm doing the things that are wealth generating, and that are good tools. But and I think that's what I've noticed can happen to some people as well. It doesn't just, or maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like even though we can be talking about like individual thoughts and generational things we're bringing, intergenerational, there's also the societal aspect. And it's hard to think about that from like a trauma perspective. Like there are people out there that are not doing well off, right? And so we think of money as this limited resource. I feel like that's how most of us think of money, as like this limited resource. So at least that's my personal issue, is like if I have too much money, like I'm taking from people who might need it, like who don't have it. Um and maybe that's how what everybody is dealing with. Maybe other people aren't dealing with those thoughts, and I just think they are. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's something about me.
So that's awesome that you shared that with us, because that's basically you put yourself up a top limit. Okay, so you have a good relationship with money until you get close to that top limit, and then issues will start. So you subconsciously will make sure not to reach that limit. Okay. I
Yeah.
don't know what your limit is, if that's a million, 10 million, or $100 million dollars on your bank account. I don't know, but that's something you don't need to disclose here in the video podcast. But that's something you can try to see, and all the viewers can see. Do I have a top limit belief? Okay, so for example, if I would have $100 million on my bank account, would that mean that I take money away from the poor? Okay, so
Right.
if that's a belief, and you feel this, and I'm not saying it's wrong, and I don't say that you need to change, but perhaps if that's not 100 million, but if you already think that if I have $1,000 on my bank account, then I'll take away from the poor, and $1,000 usually is not so much in the US today. So and then it's a problem, because you're limiting yourself to actually get more money, and then you could decide what you do with the money. You could donate it. You could give it away. Okay.
That's true.
So if you have $100 million on your bank account, you could spend 90 million and do some charity work with it. But since you have that belief, you will never reach that because your subconscious will make sure to that you're not reaching it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So
Mm,
there's a logical view, okay, and
sure.
actually, I could add to the logical view that money is not a limited resource. Money is created by the governments,
Yeah.
okay, and that's what we see with inflation. So
Yeah.
on the logical scale, is there's always much money. It depends on how much you have on your bank account and what you do with it.
Yeah.
Okay, and when we look very very clearly onto why money is created, I think it was created as a great tool. Okay, because if I produce milk and that's the only thing I have, and you produce something I want, but you already have enough milk, I couldn't get it from you.
Right.
Okay, so we have something intermediate. We have a tool which is money. So I can sell my milk. I have money. I can give the money to you, and you can buy whatever you like. So fundamentally, is a great tool. But as always, we associate things with money out of our experience and out of the experience our ancestors had with money, and so we have our beliefs around it. Okay, that
Right.
things we don't want. We want to be good. We want to be good people, and certain behavior with money is bad. Okay, burning money, for example, is considered bad and makes complete sense. Instead of burning $100 bill, you could give it to somebody in need. But there are some people who have their own issues that might, for fun, on a party, burn $100 bill.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then we create our beliefs around it, and perhaps they end up hurting us. So I'm not saying that all beliefs of money are something we need to change or are wrong or something. That's never what I say. It's just some beliefs we have that are helping us. Okay, so for example, the belief of working to get money. Yeah, that's a very fundamental belief. Otherwise, getting money is a little bit difficult, perhaps. Perhaps not. Perhaps you win in the lottery when you have a different belief. Um, but then if their belief is something like $1,000 is too much, I can't have $1,000 in my bank account. I will never get that financial freedom, that financial stability. So I would be able to donate money, for example, for charity.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I hadn't thought about that. And I think you can. I think you can see that, like we've talked about in the model, the Trine model. I feel like money tends to. I feel like I still have my things to deal with money personally, but I feel I tend to like to think of things as being more emotional at the root, and we've talked about this a lot, right? But sometimes I feel like I'm the kind of person that has more difficulty changing things from a logical perspective. Like it just doesn't work for me that well. Emotionally, it does a lot more. I have noticed, however, that thinking about money from a logical perspective, and learning from a logical perspective about money has been really a great tool. Whereas I don't agree with it on other forms of trauma work, I suppose. Um, so I think I have to sneeze. That's why I'm pausing. I guess not. And but at the same time, I still think it's really important to, okay, like for example, I can logically say that, again, from reading a lot and from watching certain people that have made me see these perspectives, that money isn't scarce. Like you said, there's no scarcity really. I mean, there's value that can fluctuate, but also there's more money in the world than we think, and having yourself open up to that idea is really helpful. However, that still doesn't mean there isn't emotional aspects that can come up. And I think you mentioned it. I think it's important to be able to identify our beliefs and our behaviors around money so that we can be very, very aware of what that says about us. I
Mhm.
think that I think that most of us just go around thinking like this is how things are, right? Like, and I don't think that happens with other things. I mean, maybe it does, but I feel like with money, it's just a lot different. Like we could just say, no, like most people work 9 to 5, and like that's just how things are. And they might not think like I'm afraid of making more money, or I'm afraid of losing my job. if I try to do more stuff, or this is secure, this is this brings me security and I need the security, I cannot sacrifice this for something else, and like things like that. Or investing is scary, or like I'm afraid of being poor. And these things may seem like they're normal things, but a lot of the times they're not even brought on by us. Like I feel like most people, especially when you're just starting from when you're graduating, when you're moving to the workforce, y- I feel like most people don't even realize that. um so I wanted to ask you, you mentioned a great one, like to asking yourself, like, how do you see yourself if you had a lot of money? So that's a great question. Are there any other ways that we can identify our beliefs and our behaviors around money to realize what we're not wanting to think about or what we're not wanting to feel?
I can give you an example. Actually, that's a very recent example. So usually there is a limit. Okay, so your bank account has a zero. There's no money on the bank account, and some people have some line of credit, so they can actually get more money than they have in their bank account. Okay,
Hmm.
but well, let's take you have a new bank account. You have your first salary on that bank account, and then it depends very much on what you see as the zero limit. Okay, if your zero limit is like the zero, the nothing on the bank account, then
Hmm.
basically your whole behavior, your whole everyday life, when you're going to pay with a credit card, you're thinking, how much money do I have left? Oh, $500. Okay, so well, I go to Starbucks and $3 for coffee. Okay, and then you just say because it's enough. So at the end of the month, it gets very close to the zero limit, and then you would say, okay, so there's just $50. Go, do I buy this coffee or do I buy this sweets or do this ice cream? Nah, no, 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 because it's 50, and then there I will have too little, so I will stay off. Okay, so
Hmm.
basically seeing your limit, and now with the smartphones and having all these apps, it makes it very easy to control your money. And then you see, okay, I just have so much left, and so you basically decide which action you take based on the limit you set. Now, if you would set, like you have a new bank account, if you would set your limit to $100, your alarm bells, your inner alarm bells would already ring when you're getting to $200. So you would
Hmm.
already change your behavior
Earlier.
because you said, nope, not this coffee, or perhaps, well, there's several gallons in gas in the tank, so perhaps I can wait until next month to fill it up or something. So you will switch your behavior because you have the limit to 100. And if you actually see the $100 as a limit, you will end up at the end of the month with this $100 limit, $100 still on the account. The next month you say, okay, 150. And if you do that every month, you end up basically with, okay, so at the end of the month, I still want to have $1,000 on the bank account. What's the difference? The difference is you still at the end of the month have $1,000. And if your dishwasher breaks down, you still can buy for $300, you can buy a dishwasher. Okay. Just because you had set a conscious and subconscious limit of what you want to spend on your bank account, you
Hmm.
change your behavior. So this is something that also comes into play that um, but that you can, depending on what you think and what you really want and what you accept, you can basically save money and get wealthier when you basically have a limit and challenge yourself. But if for whatever reason you say, I'm not challenging myself, because if I fail, I feel so stupid. So for example, again, if I say I have a limit of $1,000 as a on my bank account, and at the end of the month my dishwasher breaks down, do I need to feel bad that I'm now going under my preset limit and I just bought the dishwasher and now I just have $700 left? I don't have to feel bad. That was like an accident, something I couldn't foresee. So you start again. 700, 750, next month 800, the next month 850, next month, and so on. And then you're at $1,000 again. Okay. But some people have this, oh, I failed. Okay. This belief, if I didn't achieve my goal, if I didn't get that objective, then I failed. And that feels horrible. And so instead of trying to challenge themselves, okay, to saying, okay, I couldn't do anything about it, that was higher powers that my dishwasher broke down, I'm just accepting that this happens, they would punish themselves, okay, and with that punishment it feels bad. And so what happens, they don't set that limit. They say, no, I'm not ambitious. I don't set that limit, because if I fail, I will have to punish myself and that hurts. So better not setting a limit. If it's zero, it's zero. And then I start action because I don't have money. So there's the behavior. Internally, I don't dare to challenge myself. It can
Hmm.
happen that automatically I'm ending up at the end of the month with $0 on the bank account. And if my dishwasher then breaks down, what do? Yeah, and then I'm in trouble. And
Right.
so this there you see the connection between behavior, logical behavior, and limits you set yourself and things you want to achieve, and emotional. Okay, when I have that belief I'm a failure, I will not challenge myself, because I don't want to experience that inner emotion of, oh, I didn't do it, and I'm such a bad person and so on. So I don't challenge myself. I just let things go, just let things slide. And then at the end of the month, okay, well, 2 days left. I don't have money. Okay, so no food. Okay, and okay, it's possible. Okay, as long as
Yeah.
you have something to drink, it's possible, but it's not really helpful. And so with the money topic, I think it's really important to see, if you have money issues, if you feel you have money issues, it's not only behavior, and it's not only income, it's not only education, it's not only luck that you had with your job. It has also to do with your emotional state. And
Right.
some emotional states, some emotional traumas that you have might inhibit you to have a behavior which helps you to gain wealth,
Yeah, that makes sense.
financial wealth.
Um, that's good. I mean, that and like that's always where we. That's kind of what we try to like talk about the most here. That it's not just like there's already so many tools out there that are really helpful. Not even from a from a not necessarily even just from a psychological perspective, but just tools on managing your money. Um, like learning skills. These are intellectual things, but there are still some limitations that cap your not even just like what you make money wise, but indirectly what you believe in yourself that you can actually accomplish, right? Like your innate skill learning, what you put your energy into, what you think you're going to fail at something that you want to become, so you don't even become it, and then you don't achieve the income or the life that you want. um so yeah, I think that's what we try to really instill when we're talking about these things. Like there is a very, very important component that guides your behavior so much, and it has to do with your emotions. And it trauma writes a script in our minds of what we can and cannot do. And so emotion is like at the root of it. And so there's something you talked about right now when you were just discussing this whole concept, and something that kept coming to my mind, and that I really I really like noticing the psyche of each that generation, especially the ones I've my generation, and then the generation like where my sisters are, like Gen Z and stuff, and how it varies. And like, so I personally like social media for that, because you get to see a lot of that. It is a culture in itself. And one thing I see a lot in on TikTok is this it's more spiritual, I guess, in nature, but it's this concept of manifestation. So I hear this word a lot, and it is that if you just whether it's visual imagery, or whether it's creating this belief that you are going to achieve the things you want by just creating these either mantras, or imagining you're gonna become you can see yourself as this person with this money. And um you know, you sing positive things about achieving your goals, and there's so many ways to think about it. But I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that, if you've seen that, because I know you're on TikTok too sometimes. Um, and I wanted to see, like, you know, from your perspective, what is manifestation, and you know, how real is it from a psychological, you know, with your background, and then a spiritual approach? Because I know that with peak states, you know, a lot of the things you have achieved as a whole, and that what the books discuss tend to also take from spiritual concepts, right? From shamanic
Mhm.
perspectives, and a lot of spiritual perspectives that, you know, we don't talk about much in the scientific community, but in a way they're all related. So what do you think about, let's just start with a simple one. What do you think about manifestation? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a huge topic. The law of attraction fills books, so we just
Yeah.
have some more minutes left. So I'll give a brief idea. At the beginning, I mentioned that person having money and using money to not feel his or her pain. Okay, so actually coping with money. If we
Right.
now think about the other thing, especially if you don't have money and you wish to manifest money somehow, I think in all the protocols and so on, everybody says don't create out of lack. Okay, if you're lacking something, you're not getting it. Okay, and there's always this I want this, I don't want this, the not doesn't really work. So, from my perspective, that has to do with if I want to create something, I need to be in the creation mode. Okay,
Hmm.
that is, for example, right hemisphere. That's creation. That's being artistic, like you making music and creating pictures or creating some sculptures or creating a house, building a house, something that's creation mode.
Hmm.
When I'm in lack, I'm not in creation mode. I'm actually in survival mode. In survival mode, I can't create. In survival mode, I just can survive. So these are the basic two modes I see in the human being. And
Okay.
there's nothing really, of course, there's some in between. I can be a little bit in survival mode, a little bit in creation mode, and so on. Because I have many consciousnesses, as we discussed, the triune brains. Some of them can be in panic, can be in trauma, can be really in survival mode because it hurts right now, being in that
Yeah.
moment, being in that situation, remembering something from the past, and some are in creation mode and they want to experience life, they want to live life, and then we have that inner conflict and inner fight going on. So therefore, I think the first step, if you don't want to manifest, is get out of survival mode, get into creation mode.
Okay.
How do I get out of survival mode? Is see where I want to survive. Okay, see, feel everything inside of you. And when you feel that there's something not calm, peaceful, and emotionally light, remember that was our definition in the Institute for the Study of Peak States for trauma. Everything that doesn't feel calm and emotionally light is trauma. And if we know we already identified trauma, then let's heal it. Okay, heal the trauma. And then after healing the trauma, we reevaluate the situation. So if I'm sitting here right now and being feeling depressed because I don't have enough money and it's I don't know 20 days to go to the end of the month and I don't know how to deal with it, I'm
Hmm.
not in creation mode. I'm in survival mode. I'm
Right.
stuck in survival mode. So let me feel that heaviness, that whatever it is that I feel, and
Hmm.
let me do these very simple techniques to resolve that trauma.
Right.
So after that, and one really important step is I cannot think how I will feel afterwards. That's impossible. That's like jumping to another dimension. If I'm in trauma, I can't use my brain to think me out of trauma. That's doesn't simply doesn't work. So am I in trauma? I use the tapping techniques, and then afterwards I feel again. Okay,
Hmm.
and I can already disclose what happens. You feel calm, peaceful, and light, and you just see it as a fact that I have $100 and there are 20 days to go. It's a fact. There's no emotion. Really difficult to feel when you're right now in survival mode. It's very hard to understand, but you got to trust me on that. You're out of survival mode. You're just neutral.
Okay.
Okay. And now comes the rest. How do you want to create the rest of this month? How do you want to create the rest of the 20 days? And
Yeah.
now, since you're not in survival mode, you can think about it. You can think about how you want to create, how you want to solve your problem. And from my experience, most people are stuck doing, especially in the money situation, in the survival mode, and they're lacking the tools to get into the normal mode and then switch into creation mode. And then, if you're in creation mode, That's how I understand these protocols for manifestation. That is something where you actually have help. And you can see that the help could be something that you're in a vibrational state. It's a different vibrational state. You're not in the state of lack anymore. You're in a higher vibrational state. And then the
Mhm.
universe does its magic and stuff comes to you. That's
Mhm.
possible. I don't have scientific proof for it, but that it's possible. From the um, behavioral standpoint, from the psychological standpoint, when I'm not in lack anymore, I'm looking at the world neutrally, okay? And I'm not thinking and ruminating about my situation. So I'm open, I look at the world, and whenever an opportunity comes by, so, okay, I pass by Starbucks and I'm ruminating, oh, I don't have enough money, my credit card bill, and so on. Instead, I could see, oh, they're looking for help. And that's exactly these 2 hours in a day I have time. So you
Mhm.
just start working at Starbucks. Again, we don't get paid for that, sorry. So, uh, and then you just have a way of another income. Okay, that's just an example. So there might be trillions of other possibilities in your
Right.
life, but when you're not in that survival mode, you're more alert, you can think clearer, you can ask people for help. Okay? Because when you're in survival mode, you might feel guilty, you might feel shame about asking people for help. If you're in that neutral or in that creation mode, you just go and say, look, can I mow your lawn? I just need 20 bucks. Okay? And then they say, yeah, mow my lawn and here's 20 bucks. So you mow your lawn, you got 20 bucks tax free. Okay. So yeah, so that's basically how I think from at least. So if in the manifestation protocols, at least when you're out of that lack, you're trauma free in that respect, you calm, peaceful light, you will take different decisions, you will have a different behavior, and that behavior will help you get by these 20 days with 100 bucks. It could
Mhm.
be, and I'm not saying that it's not there, but as I said, I can't prove that scientifically, that if you feel that vibrational state, when you really feel that joy, how these protocols always go, feel the joy, experience that you already have the money, how would you
Yeah.
feel? So it's not about the money, but it's the emotion, it's the positive emotion that you have. When you have these positive emotions, then money just come. But it might not come directly as money, but it might come as a new job, as a car, as a new friend who's helping you out, somebody asking to house
Yeah.
sit or whatever. And that's basically the magic of the universe. And that's something I want to be open to. Okay. I don't
Right.
want to say it's not possible. Why? Why would I close that door? I don't need to close that door. Okay. I can be open to miracles.
Mhm.
And if they happen, great. If they don't happen, and now is the thing, if they don't happen and I feel not calm, peaceful, emotionally light, I'm in trauma again. Okay. But
Right.
if they don't happen, I feel neutral. Okay. I'm not in trauma. So I can be a little bit more relaxed. Of
Gotcha.
course, there are people that are in a very depressed state, that are in a very socially difficult state, especially now with the pandemic going on. I completely understand that, and that it's incredibly difficult to to get out of that. I
Yeah.
completely understand.
I
But,
can see that.
but perhaps first understand the mechanics, yeah, and then when you have the mechanics, there's basically the steps, and that's the steps to get out of your situation.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to ask you, how come I feel like in there's another aspect right here that you were mentioning to an extent, but um there wasn't an explicit word for it. And what I was thinking a lot was the idea of openness, especially because we're I mean, this past few years, even though I feel like I don't know if it's like a law of nature, but whenever there's like a lot of struggle and chaos, kind of like that metaphor with like a diamond is built with pressure. So is innovation in these new kind of concepts and like a new age and new things kind of developing, and we're seeing that a lot more explicitly, with I see it like, for example, with the idea of blockchain and people talking about crypto all the time, right? And it's not about crypto necessarily, but it's about and people working from home and the world moving more and more to internet to find jobs and to work from home and to do things for society through your computer. And I feel like there's more and more opportunities that maybe weren't available to earlier generations in a new form. And so, but also the idea of things being a scam, or there are things that are scams, but everything being a scam, and this is just not the way things are done. And I always see that the same way I see people with music. There are things you like when you're younger, but as you get older, you stop. And we talked about this before. You stop listening to new music and stuff. And I also think it's because you gravitate to the things that make you feel safe and make you feel comfortable. And
Mhm.
sometimes the things that are new might activate things within you you don't want to feel. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering, how come whenever we think about trauma from the perspective of peak states, we're talking about calm, peaceful, and light? Where does openness fit in within that? Does it fit in somewhere, or is it just automatically there because when you're calm, you're already open? You're already there's nothing constricting, basically. There's the opposite.
Right.
There's no opposite.
So, right. So, I like that very much, and I agree with you. So, many times when we have discussions about something being good, being bad, it's not about the thing that we're discussing about, but it's how that thing makes me feel. Okay. And if I'm like 40, 50, 60, and I'm now like very unsure about all these changes in the world, and I don't feel safe because I don't dominate my smartphone and it's all so fast, I might just say, oh, that's not good for me. I just take my diary and my agenda and do it handwritten. Okay, that's fine. But it's not really free will. Yeah, that this choice is not by free will, but it's because I don't want to feel that uncomfortable feeling doing everything on my smartphone. So people think that it's free will, but actually it's just avoiding pain. Okay.
Right.
So when we look at it from a biological point of view, and we have a one cell organism, okay, and we have that one cell organism in a petri dish, and there's a dot of poison. So that one cell organism might go towards that poison, detect that it's poisoned, and will go back and will retract and will close down because it wants to save itself. If we don't put poison there, but we put food there, what will that one cell organism do? Because the one cell organism doesn't have a mouth and all that fancy stuff that we have. It will just incorporate, because it will open itself up and incorporate the food and will digest the food. And so if I see a threat, if I perceive a threat, that's like this dot of poison that I have in that petri dish, then I will close down and I will try to survive. I will try to protect myself.
Hmm.
But if I see something which is nurturing, which is something that lets me live, that lets me prolong my life, I'll open up and take it in.
Okay.
Exactly like the one cell organism with the food. And since in the peak states model, we talk about the one cell, the primary cell that is the director of everything in our life and the interface between biology and consciousness, we can use that model very well. So yeah, we have these two basic modes. We have the survival mode. Yeah, I'm protecting myself. I'm closing myself down. I'm not taking any chances. Okay, because chances, if I take chances, I might just die.
Yeah.
But I'm opening myself up. And so whenever I'm in trauma, I basically perceive danger and I close myself down, out. Okay. And
Mhm.
whenever I heal that trauma, I can be neutral and I decide, do I want to open myself up? Do I want to go through that dark alley or I don't? Okay. And that's basically the openness.
That makes sense. Yeah. So it's kind of like built into what you're saying. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, there's I know we have just a little bit of time left, so I want to ask a question that is beyond the scope of just at least I think it is, of just what we've been talking about, which is that money and trauma, um how do I put it, they, like we were saying, they are there's these scripts that live in our mind, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, of what we can and can't achieve, can't do, how we see ourselves, our relationships, the money, basically. But I wanted to touch on a topic that's more, I don't know if it's cultural or gendered or what it is exactly, but depending on what part of the world you live in, you in as a whole, people think of there's these like larger underlying scripts that we live our lives around, right? Like for example, I don't know how Germany is, but the culture in the US, for example, is um there's more individuality. Or I'm not comparing to Germany because I don't know Germany, but like the idea is that everybody is everybody's very individualistic, and at the same time, I feel like there's still like the idea that men tend to be the ones that um, have to hold like make more money, or not make more money, but um, be in charge, like be the breadwinner. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. I'm just saying what I've noticed. But I'm also thinking that this is a country built on like a lot of productivity and a lot of working hard all the time. And to what extent is that? How do you categorize that within a trauma perspective for both men and women, when it's such a large thing, when it feels like it's not something that's like individual to you, but it's almost like you were born into this and you don't even realize it, but that's how most of us live our lives. What's going on there that's not an individual trauma? Is that like a generational thing? Because I mean,
Oh,
so I moved here. I wasn't born here, so it wasn't like I learned it in a way. So what do you think
yeah.
is happening there?
So, well, it can be many, many things. So it's a
Right.
broad topic you just brought up, but and it also includes money. Okay, the way how you treat money, yeah? And also in Germany, northern part would be like very very closed off with the money, and the southern part would show if you have money, show off. Okay, would show designer clothing and so on. So it could be generational. So much of our culture has to do with generational things. Okay, I noticed that working with clients all over the world, that certain clients, for example, in countries where we had lots of war, like here in Germany, and then the Second World War, First World War, 30-year war, and so on, generationals tend to be about survival, having enough food, having enough water, having a shelter, being safe. Okay, while when you go into countries where they're then closer to the equator, where there was not so much war and they have all the food because it just grows on trees, the topics are different. So the topics might be around honor, they might be around relationship, and something they're not so much about survival. So generational play a huge role into how we behave, because generational, remember that the characteristic of generational feels really personal to you. And obviously you behave in a way how you think you are. Okay, so that's it. The other thing is there's something like a joint consciousness. It's very difficult and it's not possible to talk about that here on the channel, but there is something. So we all together somehow have a joint consciousness and decide stuff together on a very subconscious level. And then there is something which is, as a social being, as humans, as a social being, has to do with being disconnected or being an outcast. So especially you said that you came from a different country living in the US. You look,
Mm.
you look very quickly. How do my peers behave? Because you don't want to be the one who's sticking the head out, okay? And you don't want to get noticed. You want to adapt very quickly to the way people work. And if that means that, I don't know, you drive to the bank with a car and put that card in the ATM machine and you're not going there by foot, you will adapt that. And that means that if you need to own a car, if all the banks have just car lanes, for example. So you change your behavior depending on what you see and the inner wish of not being disconnected, not losing connection to your peers. Okay. So that is really, really a very important psychological principle. Our first
Hmm.
core emotional need is feeling connected. And how we get that. For example, we can feel connected with, if I'm a single person, then I go and get a haircut and they do hair massage, and then you go to the massage thing, and then you get some muscle massage or something there, and so you basically buy connection, you buy interaction with people, okay, or you go and go and to this gambling halls because there are other people you can talk, or you go to a bar and there are other people you can talk. So you basically, with money, you can buy that social interaction. You can buy somehow that sense of being connected. It's
Hmm.
not true connection, but it's a way of connecting. Or you find friends, and you find true friends. There's no like, I do this and then you do that, some stuff, but you find true friends that are um, innately interested in you and your being, and want to stay with you, and then you have true connection. Or you have a partner that is innately interested in you, and then you feel connected, and then you feel safe. And as long as you don't, or you have the possibility of not feeling safe, you will automatically adjust your behavior to that. Make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But so if somebody were to be dealing with these things personally, where and they came to you, what's something that you would begin working on them with to
Well, first of all, we'll have to figure out if they're really willing to work with the money issue,
right?
okay? Because that is very challenging. So
Yeah,
the
it sounds
first thing
challenging.
I would recommend is take a piece of paper and a pen, very old style. Not don't do it on a computer because you have to think about it and not type. And write down all your beliefs about money, okay? And about people with money, people without money. Just write them down.
Hmm.
And then the second step is to just say that's a positive belief, okay, or that's a negative belief, that's a judgment. And then if you see all the points you've written down, you come up with how much positive beliefs do you have about money, how much negative beliefs do you have about money.
Hmm.
And then think about getting rid of that negative belief. If you can do it, great. If you can't do it, call me. I'll help you. So basically, that is the thing. Do you want to give up what you feel, what you believe about money? Okay, and there is a certain way of, and if you do that exercise, you will feel that there's a certain way of discomfort that comes up. You say, no, I like judging the rich people about being rich and being not so nice. So okay, but as long as you do that, you will never become rich. Okay,
Right. So you're
and
projecting
if you don't want to
those
become
things.
rich, that's fine. But on the other hand, you can't complain. That would be very illogical. You can't complain about not having enough money when you are judging people that have money.
Right.
Okay, so if that is something you want to change, please first start and look at your own beliefs and see if you're willing to change. And yes, there are ways to change. It's a lot of work. It's not a pill you just throw in and then something changes. It's a lot of work,
Mhm.
but I think it pays off.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think most of us want to live specific, everybody has their own kind of life they want to live, and for better or for worse, depending on where you stand, it is a fact of life that you need uh currencies to valid currencies to make it happen. So no, I agree with that. And I think I think it's not a topic that I think it's a topic that people can begin to tackle, because it's something that everybody deals with one way or another,
Everybody.
from coping to poverty to scarcity to what you believe about yourself and what you can achieve. Like, there are so many topics that are just interrelated, and I think that everybody can benefit from that. So
Yeah.
Daniel, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the questions. I hope they benefit anybody who's listening to this now or in the future. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to reach out to Daniel. That's what he's here for. And if you have any questions for us, things that maybe we didn't discuss that you'd like to hear, as always, just type them in the comments and let us know. Um,
Thank you. Yes, and there will be a second one about money. It's such a big topic. We're just able to. So if you have questions and ideas, then just yeah, we're happy to work with them.
okay, great.
Awesome.
Well, that's it for now. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Daniel. And yeah, I don't
Thank you,
have much to
Sergio,
say.
for
I
also
appreciate it.
discussing that topic. And I was very curious about your questions. So yeah, I'm very happy. Thank you. See
Cool.
you soon.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
Bye. Bye.